A very warm welcome to the session today, Winning the War for Talent, Building a Year-Round Attraction Strategy. Just a quick note before we start that we will be, or we already are, recording this session for those that are unable to attend today. So I'm Aaron Chantelo from Talent Solutions, and together with Lou Zaunetti from Brightworks and Clancy Meany from Prosple, we'll be hosting today's session, which will bring together insights from across New Zealand and Australia, with special guests Kate Coley from the University of Auckland and Caleb Jasmat from Contact Energy. And I'll just hand over to Lou to introduce herself.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you all on this call. My name's Lou Zaunetti. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands in Australia, for those in Australia, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and those in our call today. And I'd invite anyone who's in Australia on those lands to share the lands that you're dialing in from today. It's always really lovely to see all of those traditional Indigenous names come through the chat. So welcome. First of all, before we kick off, I wanted to just give a quick introduction on the Brightworks and Talent Solutions strategic partnership. As many people who have joined the call before will know, we've run lots of webinars together. Brightworks and Talent Solutions live on Planet Graduate. We are both early careers consultancies that specialise in all aspects of early careers, from strategy, traction, recruitment and development, and we support all different types of programs with their organisations with their grad and internship programs. New Zealand obviously is very lucky to have Talent Solutions, and here in Australia, where I am in Melbourne, we have Brightworks, and we work really closely together as businesses to service the whole of Australia and New Zealand as sister organisations. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm going to hand over to Clancy.
Thank you so much, Lou. Hi, everyone. So great to be here today. There's a lot of our clients on here today, so thank you so much for joining. But for anyone that may be unfamiliar with Prosple, we are a graduate jobs board in Australia and New Zealand. Our mission is to help every student get the best possible start to their career, and we do that by trying to help students find the perfect job at the perfect company for them. And we work with a wide range of different employers in Australia and New Zealand on their attraction strategies to help them try and attract the most relevant candidates for their grad and internship programs. So lovely to be here with you all today. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Clancy. So yeah, today we'll be covering the case for a year-round attraction strategy, turning that into on-campus activation, digital activation, and then we'll bring that all together through an employer example. After our roundup, we'll then essentially have the opportunity for you to ask questions of the panel through the webinar Q&A chat or just the general chat. And we'll also really briefly talk about how you can continue the conversation online for a chance to win a prize. So let's start with the case for building a year-round attraction strategy. So why do it? Well, when you think about it, students are on campus for a minimum of 3 years, and with that in mind, it's actually a little bit at odds that most employers seem to spend a short, typically kind of 4-week window of time on campus each year. And when we look at the data across both New Zealand and Australia, we can see that people are actually starting to look for jobs at all stages of their degree, or even before they begin tertiary study. And whilst there are some variances across Australia and New Zealand, with Australians telling us they're getting started with their job search a little earlier, perhaps a little bit more organised. What is consistent is the fact that there is sort of no one time when a student actually starts that search. And what this tells you is that it's actually that you really want to get your brand in front of them at all stages to capture your entire audience. And the data from the previous slide alone, I think, builds a pretty good case, but there's actually a number of other reasons, that we could think of to move to a year-round approach. You'll avoid getting lost during peak periods. You'll build engagement and brand loyalty through a meaningful presence and be able to leverage social media platforms to stay connected. This will also position you to be a front of mind for students who are also looking for internships. And we know that they do typically start looking as early as their second year of study. And thinking about internships, I'll now pass over to Lou from Brightworks to take a little bit of a closer look in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. We have to look at internships as a way to engage our student community for those graduate opportunities. And I think it's really interesting. We can see here on the slide that students continue to have a huge appetite for those real work experiences whilst they're studying, and really to help them embed what they're learning in their studies into practical real life or real work examples. We know that internships play a critical role in providing students with an introduction into the corporate world and help them with that transition, and also really provides great opportunities for employers to engage with talent ahead of competition. So we've seen a steady growth over the last couple of years in organisations offering internships as a pipeline into their grad programs, but also the number of students wanting to engage with internships, whether they are virtual or in person on client campus, or sorry, industry campus. So we understand that, there's a real interest with students wanting to participate in these types of activities. And whilst they're mainly being reserved for students towards the end of their studies, certainly we're seeing more universities starting to promote student work opportunities in those first couple of years of their degrees, really to try and get that work experience whilst they're still in those first few years of study. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the role of creating connection. And this comes back to creating that touch point with the student market as you're starting to promote your opportunities. As Aaron's already referred to, with the student market being on campus for 3 years, sometimes longer than that, it means that the touch points are usually quite contained and quite streamlined when we're talking about grad recruitment opportunities. But actually, there's a lot that we can be doing to create touch points with this community. And I know Kate's going to talk a little bit more about that. We know that we use often there's a rule of 7 in terms of a touch point with a brand in order to have a meaningful connection. But what we're hearing is that this has risen dramatically in the rise of social and digital media. And so consumers are wanting to have much higher points of contact or touch points with the brands that they're going to engage with. And that also talks to employer brand as well. So HubSpot has suggested that up to 20 interactions are needed with your target market in order to form a connection. So that's really challenging to do that in a 4-week application period. And so there's certainly a case for spreading that out over a longer period of time. The other thing is really interesting, I think, is to understand what students are wanting to know about. And so we do have some data there on the screens there from Australia and New Zealand. This data is actually from the Student Pulse survey. So both Australia and New Zealand in Talent Solutions and Brightworks have recently completed their 2024 Student Pulse. And we're out there asking students, what are they looking for when it comes to opportunities? What are the types of things that you need to promote and talk about? And I think you can see here there's some similarities, but we can also see some real differences across the Australian and New Zealand market again. Not only are Australian students looking for internships much earlier in their careers, they're much more interested in money as well. I don't know what that says about Aussies overall. And also those training and development and company culture. Whereas moreover in New Zealand, we're seeing that there's a really interesting, well, what's the job actually going to look like? What's my day-to-day look like? Where is it going to be based? And then salary comes into play. So some really interesting differences between the students in these two countries. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Kate to talk a little bit more about on-campus activation.
Thank you, Lou, and kia ora koutou. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate, Employer Engagement Manager at Waipapa Taumatoro, the University of Auckland. Great to be here today. So, sustaining your brand presence across the year on campus. Sounds easy, right? No, we get it. As Aaron mentioned a few slides back, cutting through all the noise and staying top of mind can be tough. And for employers of early talent, it's really important to be thinking of how best to maintain relationships and build your brand beyond your recruitment open and close dates. As early talent recruiters, it's a good idea to be looking at different ways to engage. Very rarely can you go down just the one route or channel, and it's about diversifying and looking at those multiple touch points across the academic year. What I'm about to go over certainly isn't an exhaustive list, and there are no doubt many other options out there. This is based on what we here at the University of Auckland have seen and what seems to work well. So as a first step when looking at on-campus activation, it's a good idea to work out how to navigate the universities. Yikes, I hear many of you saying. Look, I'm the first to acknowledge that most universities, including ours, can be a bit of a rabbit warren. I've been here 6.5 years and I'm still working out who I need to know and where I need to go. The good news is, though, for employers, is that the central careers teams are a really good starting point. So all the New Zealand universities have one, as do the Australian ones. And while we all operate a little bit differently, the nuts and bolts of what we do and the services that we offer are pretty much the same. So here at Waipapa Taumatoro, the University of Auckland, we'll often have an initial chat with employers, understand who and how they are wanting to target, and then go from there. So next steps will often be redirecting employers to faculty contacts who can then advise further on local engagement options, particularly if your target cohort is limited to that one faculty. And if you're stuck on where to go in the first place, so who you need to contact, if you jump onto the NZ Uni Talent website, there is a full list there of your contacts for the New Zealand universities. So as a second step, it's doing your homework. The first question I'll often ask an employer is, who do you want to target? Followed closely by, what is your desired outcome when it comes to student engagement? Knowing where you want to focus your efforts and what you want to achieve through those will really help us help you. And it's also thinking about where in the student's university journey you want to start that engagement, which is ideally before students reach their final years. One of the earlier slides gave an overview of when students are starting to look for grad roles, and it shows that it's happening across all years. And that's something similar that our team has observed here with general engagement. And we know it's not just at the pointy end of their degrees, and our data backs this up. So 20% of the nearly 3,000 students we scanned at our expos this year were first year, and just under 50% were mid-program. So that's nearly 70% of all scanned students who weren't in their final year. Yes, this might simply be reflecting the interest and demand from students in the internship space, particularly with those mid-program students, but it's also telling us that they're not just motivated to engage with industry and start doing their homework in their final year. So once you've worked out who you want to target and when, it's then thinking about different engagement and branding opportunities. And my advice is to mix it up. In addition to the standard recruitment engagements, such as expos, employer presentations, using the job board, it's really good to find out about additional engagement opportunities, such as supporting faculty initiatives. This might be being on a board, engaging with the Dean leadership programs, attending guest lecture series, could be offering scholarships or even sponsoring academic programs. These can really enhance your brand's reputation and demonstrate your commitment to education and student development. Another good and popular option is to collaborate with student clubs, especially equity clubs or those relating to your industry. We've got a huge number of these associations here at the University of Auckland, many of which do a really fantastic job in terms of engaging and supporting their members, and will often look to industry for support and sponsorship with different initiatives. And we know students respond well to clubs and club-hosted events. Club events are offered by students for students, creating a safe space for them to participate in. There's also the option of hosting skills workshops, being part of discussion panels, or taking part in industry showcases. Think about leading your own industry showcase. Get together with your competitors, tell our students why they should care about career opportunities in your sector. And to give you a couple of examples from the University of Auckland, where organisations have been successful in maintaining brand presence. So in the engineering faculty, employers are given the opportunity to sponsor and judge Part 4 projects. And then in our law faculty, They have monthly spotlight interviews. So firms can take turns on the faculty LinkedIn page to highlight exciting cases they have wrapped up. So yeah, good to have a bit of a think about what you might want to get involved with, and also realistically what you can get involved with, taking into account budgets, people power, and of course areas of your business that you want to focus your efforts. And then once all those options have been considered, and you've got a better idea of what you do want to get involved with, it's really good to plan ahead. And now is a great time to start those conversations with the universities about next year's engagement, find out about those different options, and book in early, especially with the expos. At the moment, all 8 New Zealand universities are working together to get those dates confirmed. And as soon as we know them, we'll be sending them out to you. And demand for expos has really shot up over the last few years. And we do expect a similar level of interest for next year. And we do understand planning 12 months or even 12 weeks isn't always possible, but if you can, plan. And finally, from me, work with us. We're here to help. Going back to my earlier point about navigating the universities, take up those opportunities to collaborate with us. Let's have a chat, let's brainstorm. We won't always have the answer or that silver bullet, but we can certainly help to start getting those creative and productive juices flowing. So that's it from me. Thank you for being such a captive audience, and I'll now pass you over to Clancy at Prosple. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Kate. I don't know if I introduced myself at the start. I think I just introduced Prosple. So if not, hi everyone, my name is Clancy. I am a graduate attraction consultant at Prosple. And today I'm here to talk to you about digital presence and what you can be doing online 365 days of the year to increase eyes on your employer brand. So something we know is that a quarter of the student population starts looking for where they want to work before the end of their first year of university. And you're all already doing so much throughout the time when you're advertising your internships and your graduate programs, the time when students are actually ready to apply. But what are we doing the other 335 days of the year? It's a very short window of time when you're actually campaigning. So what I'd like to talk to you about today are just a couple of tools you can use to help build your online presence outside of campaign season, which will help you increase your employer brand and attractiveness, which in turn will impact your ability to increase application numbers and the relevance of candidates you'll receive during campaign season. So, Aaron, if you could just go to the next slide. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about today is pre-registers. So for those of you that may be unaware, a pre-register at face value is quite similar to an expression of interest. However, expressions of interest are traditionally a little more generic, whereas a pre-register is a live opportunity complete with information about upcoming roles. So there's a little more clarity from a student perspective around what they're actually registering their interest for. One of the beauties of pre-registers is that they're a really cost-effective way to generate visibility all year round of not only your grad or internship program, but just your employer brand overall. And essentially what we're trying to avoid with a pre-register is a student coming across your employer brand, whether that be on campus or online, loving what they see and engaging really, really well with you, and you not collecting their details. So if you don't have a strategy around this, you're really missing out on a huge opportunity here, as we simply just can't expect that students are going to see your brand, whether that be on campus or online, and remember to apply for your job during that 30-day window when applications are open. So what's the process? It's very simple. As mentioned before, a student will stumble across your employer brand. At that stage, you may not be hiring yet, or the student might not be ready to apply. For example, they could be in their first year. From here, you need to ensure you have a system in place to collect the student's details, i.e. a pre-register. And then step 3, very simple, encourage them to apply at the right time. So if you partner with Prosple, we do that for you. If you don't partner with us or use your own system, either way, it doesn't matter. It ensures qualified students know you're hiring. Okay, and the second thing I'm going to be talking about today is social media. Aaron, thank you so much. So we understand social media can still be an intimidating domain for many employers, and this really shows. I bet a lot of our clients are probably sick of us harping on about the importance of it, but there's still such a significant portion of employers that still haven't begun to use social media as a part of their attraction strategy. And so referencing that data, what do we know? we know that 97% of Gen Z are using social media at least once per day. And sometimes that's in the vicinity of 3, 4, 5 hours per day. I'm sure there's many of us here today that are guilty of the old doom scroll, myself included. But while there's 97% of the student cohort using social media this frequently, we know, as per the most recent AAGE employer survey data, that there's still a really limited number of employers using social media to recruit early talent. So 46% of employers are using Instagram, 46% are using Facebook, and only 10% of employers are using TikTok. So there is a massive, massive opportunity here to be tapping into those channels, especially when you take in some of these points, in particular, the one TikTok has overtaken Google as the main search engine for Gen Z. That's just so interesting. So yeah, at this point, if you still aren't considering social media as a beneficial tool to include as a part of your attraction strategy, you probably need to be asking yourselves why. And don't get me wrong, we do completely understand that some employers still have very real limitations on the use of social media, such as government employers, in particular platforms like TikTok. We totally get there is a lot of red tape around those platforms. So if you don't have the ability to open a TikTok or other social media accounts internally, there are avenues available to you, such as outsourced providers like Prosple, shameless plug, who run social media campaigns on their own social channels for you. So don't feel like it's the be all and end all if you're unable to open your own accounts internally. Another thing about social media, there's no doubt about the fact that it's a very beneficial tool to use during campaign season, of course, because the beauty of social media is that we can target, female engineering students in Melbourne, for example. However, we are seeing more and more employers start to use their social media campaigns outside of campaign season to help generate impressions and just overall brand awareness, which we definitely recommend. And you could also have your social media campaign link back to your pre-registers, for example. From an employer perspective, it may feel harder to track the return on investment from a campaign that focuses solely around building brand awareness, as you're not seeing a direct correlation between the campaign and applications generated. But it is really important to shift our mindset around this and understand the long-lasting value of impressions and the impact that has on your employer brand over time. In particular, the flow-on effects of a social media campaign are long-lasting. A really great example of this is one of our clients, the Inland Revenue Department. Sarah, if you're listening, they invested into a social media campaign with Prosple earlier in the year that generated 154,000 impressions and 200 applications generated. And when you think about that and just really put that into perspective, 154,000 eyes on your employer brand. And due to that increase in engagement, I can't obviously share too much in this area, but Inland Revenue are polling really, really well for the 2025 Top 100. And that's fantastic for your employer brand as well. So the flow-on effect into other aspects of your employer brand is really, really important and really significant. So just a couple of top tips from me before I wrap up. When it comes to pre-registers, get them live if you have the ability to do so. Essentially, you can get a pre-register live pretty much as soon as your role closes. So get them live ASAP. It's really, really beneficial. When it comes to social media, reconsider a year-round social strategy rather than just during your campaign season. Try and do a little bit more outside of when you're campaigning, and focus on the right platforms. So for example, TikTok traditionally is a lot better at generating impressions as opposed to a platform like Google, which is a lot better at generating applications. So you really need to decide sort of what you're hoping to get out of the campaign and then choose your platforms wisely. And the last thing is you need to ensure the content that you are advertising is Gen Z centric, because we just know about Gen Z, if they don't engage with the content well, they essentially switch off straight away. So if you don't have the ability to create that kind of content internally, then use an outsourced provider, someone that does have their finger on the pulse and is following trends closely and know what Gen Z engages with really well. But yeah,
Clancy,
that's me. Oh yeah,
Clancy, before you move on, there's a question. There's
Yeah.
a question in the chat, and I reckon we should address it now
Yeah,
than waiting till the end, because there's a little bit of interest. So from Kelly Pfeffer, the lovely Kelly Pfeffer from Suncorp, has asked, are we saying that students are now using these channels for employment searching, or is it still mainly preferred for personal use? So I think you've referred to that a little bit about like the building of a brand and the awareness of a brand online. But do you think that from the research that you have access to, or even your own, using your own data that you've got, are you finding that students are actually searching for employment opportunities on these types of channels?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beauty of running social media ads is because they're already scrolling through social media, and the beauty of retargeting and, retargeting them based on their interests and what they're studying and all of that kind of stuff. When they're just using it for personal use, that's how you can target them. And then they just go on to click on the opportunity and apply that way. So it's not as if they're consciously always searching for roles using these platforms, but the idea is that we can sort of target them subconsciously as well, if that makes sense. I hope that answered correctly.
Yeah, thanks, Clancy. I think that's, yep. She says thanks, and Shaylin also says thanks. So well done.
All right, over to you, Caleb. Before Caleb, you start, I just wanted to say that Contact Energy as well, Caleb's the early careers lead at Contact, and they're just such a fantastic example of, on Prosple, of that really long-lasting employer branding, and in particular the results that they've seen on Prosple. They've gone from number 87 in our top 100 in 2023 to now number 2 this year, and we really attribute that to a lot of the things that Caleb and the team are doing additionally outside of their campaigning. So that's one of the reasons why we've chosen Caleb to come on today, because he's got such fantastic insights. So over to you, Caleb.
Jeez, no pressure, Clancy. Thanks. Hi, everyone. For those that I haven't met or come across, I'm Caleb. I'm early career lead here at Contact Energy, and so we're a generator retailer of power back in Aotearoa. I've been with the company about 2 years ago and came in and stepped into what was probably a pretty fairly blank canvas. I might just get you to flick through to the next couple of slides for me, Aaron. So I'll touch on a couple of things and we'll rip straight into it because I know time is of the essence. I guess when we came in, the first thing that we sort of did was really just look at the internal and externally as well, and what we were seeing. And I think there's already been a few really good points touched on around, what students are wanting to know around salary, role description. We know a few things about what they are, I guess, rank high in their priority list around climate change, cost of living pressures, all those good things as well. And then internally, we jumped straight into it really and started to just understand, I guess, what the problem is that we're trying to solve, what challenges are we actually facing as a business. And there's a few of them listed there which some may resonate with some of you. This is not all of them. This is just a few of the common themes that sort of arose throughout those conversations. And in terms of those discussions, we ran it with a really multitude of stakeholders across the business. So from current graduates and alumni, grads and interns within the business, through to senior leaders, through to from our generation side of the business, through to the retail side of the business, and just try to really understand the crux of what they were struggling with. And it really helped to sort of paint a picture. And I guess you move into that next slide, and it really starting to define the problem that we wanted to solve, and like a very high level, but it sort of touches on a couple of key stats of, this is from our 2022 integrated report, but nearly half of our people within the generation trading side of the business were over 50. 18% female, 7% Māori and Pacifica. So some pretty scary stats there in terms of what we were facing as a business. We certainly, from a longevity perspective, we didn't have, we needed to develop the skills and capability, and we wanted to do that in a way that was reflective of, with a workforce that was reflective of Aotearoa. And so that really started to, answer the problem that we wanted to solve with early careers and with the pathway in from a graduate and intern perspective. So just really setting that, taking the time to understand what you're trying to solve and defining the problem really clearly so you can then articulate that to your stakeholders sort of went a long way. If you just flick through to the next slide and we start to just look into sort of setting that real clear direction. And now look, the clear direction, I've just sort of dropped it into 4 key things. Target your energy. you can't do it all, so you only have X amount of effort points is how we like to look at it, and your goal is really to try and get as many reward points as you can. We made a really clear switch to focusing on the experience that we were providing individuals within early careers, so be that interns, apprentices, graduates. So accepting that times have changed. Gone are the days really where you're probably going to keep someone from straight out of university for 5, 10, 15 years, but really simplifying it down and just providing, how do we provide them a really great experience so that when they leave Contact, they leave with some really top tier skill sets and some experience that makes them really valuable to the market, knowing that they'll leave and they'll be able to go and gain more skills, more experience, but they leave hopefully going, shit, I'd like to come back here one day. And that's the part, like, acknowledge that it's okay for them to go, to grow, gain more knowledge and skills, but if you focus on that experience, hopefully one day they'll come back, and they'll come back more knowledgeable and with more experience and add more value to your business. So that real focus on experience, and it ties in quite nicely into the next point, which I sort of want to spend a bit of time on, is that collaboration. Oh, sorry, stay on that slide, Aaron, around collaboration over competition. And just a lot of companies, and I think it was Lou or might have been talking to it earlier, around a lot of employers don't start to look at internships until their students are in their sort of third year, or that's when historically students have started to look for internships. I think we're quite deliberate, and actually we don't look at that from how many years into their degree are there, really focusing on actually, like, if they're a great fit for the organization, they're demonstrating those really essential skill sets that we see in our high potential or high performing graduates and interns, being really open to bringing them on board earlier, and then encouraging them as well to go out and try different companies and industries throughout their internships, right? It's the one time that they get to try and figure out what it is they like versus what it is they don't like. And hell, if they like what they get with your company or your employer, then chances are they'll come back because they've had a good experience. So I think being really open in regards to that sort of sets you off in the way. And then as industry, I guess, how can we start to collaborate more as well? So, and then being really values and purpose driven is probably the other thing. And the example I sort of provide there around, it sort of ties back into that experience piece, is we had our assessment center, and we had an interview with as a finance accounting grad, and she interviewed with our chief people officer and one of our finance managers, and our chief people officer, Jan Bibby, came out and goes, that was one of the best interviews I've ever had. About half an hour later, they're sitting in a learning in a session with our chief retail officer, Matt Bolton, and this individual grad asked a question. Matt is an accounting graduate by trade, and so he started his career in one of the big four. And so she goes, oh, well, where do you think I should start my career? Should I start it at Contact, or do you think I'm better to go and get experience as a with a big four? And Matt, just bless him, was like, I started in a big four, I thought it was great, and that's where I'd encourage you to start. And so poor Tej, our finance manager at the back, sitting there pulling his hair out because our chief retail officer just told his top grad that she should start her career in a big four as opposed to at Contact. And I guess that just speaks to that value around actually what is best for the individual as opposed to what is best for the business. And if you have that real strong value and connection around providing that customer first experience, it really does a lot for your brand in the long run. I'll flip through to the next stage, and this is where we start to get a little bit more into how we started to curate, not create, our year-round attraction strategy. And look, I've already touched on it a bit, but obviously this is central to graduates, interns, students, and so just not being not being afraid to ask those silly questions to the demographic that is closest to them. And if you've got grads or interns already in your business, ask them what they find interesting, what do they like. And it's certainly something we did both internally and then also just at Career Expos, using that opportunity while you're in front of graduates, just to, pick their brains, understand what makes them tick, what kind of content do they like to see. Given that, grads have just spent 3, 4, maybe 5 years in university, they're pretty well versed to the life of a student, I'd say, certainly more than probably me or you. So, if you can get out of them what sort of makes them tick and what they engage with, certainly goes a long way to helping, I guess, drive the direction that you guys then want to go. And we sort of then start to look at, it's not about recreating the wheel, but actually, what have you got? What do we already have internally, and repurposing existing content, and then curating that message in a way that is then engaging. If you're lucky enough to have internal or external comms teams or marketing and brand teams, use their skills and expertise as well to help you curate those messages. That was something that we sort of used to great effect and have been able to do so. Next thing, and again, we've already touched on sort of a bit around social media, but just really picking your channels. There's a lot of different channels or reaches that you can use to get in touch with your target market, right? For us, some of the challenges we face, which wasn't probably on there, but with our retail business, we're obviously very customer centric in that regard. So, using the likes of Instagram and Facebook for our marketing, like recruitment campaigns, and that wasn't going to be possible through the contact pages. So just having to sort of change our tack and just adjust slightly. And so, how do we use social media? Well, we actually use it from a brand perspective of sharing our story around decarb, as well as the retail aspect as well. So that's where we linked into social media, and Instagram was more from that, hey, this is the story that we're trying to tell. We're leading the decarbonisation of Aotearoa. Do you want to be a part of that? Da 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 da. As opposed to direct, hey, our recruitment campaign is now open, apply here. We sort of pushed that more through Prosple and then through LinkedIn as well. So if you jumped onto our website, you wouldn't. I'd give anyone $5 if they could find our careers page, because it's a bloody tough ask trying to do that. So that was one of the key problems was, well, how do we get a window in for students that as soon as they go contact, they can't actually find where we post our jobs. And so we made that switch to generating all our comms or all our applications via Prosple and then back into our ATS, just so that we had a really clear window into the business for graduates. So those were the couple of things that we did. And then I guess that last one there is just around whatever you do, just being consistent and, perhaps telling you how to suck eggs with this one, but, whatever you choose to do, just be consistent, right down to even university engagement. And, Kate touched on a couple of good points about being planned. And I think also internally looking at if you've had grads previously or interns previously, do you know what in universities they come from? Do you know what degrees they come from? Where do you have the most success? Really get into the data and understand the detail around where you guys have success. And then that can set you off as to where you then need to target your energy, right? Or putting your energy where it matters. For us, luckily Kate's on the call, and University of Auckland is one of those universities we've had great success with. So, we really target a lot of our time into those specific classes and courses where we know we do have had good success historically. Using that premise of good people know good people. Do your students still have connections into old lecturers? Do they have connections into old papers and cohorts? Do they know students that are still studying? All these little things just start to help you create your brand and just create regular touch points with those students throughout the year. We'll go on to the next page and we'll get into, you probably want to know what we actually did, because I just told you a lot about how we got there. These were just a couple of things, and I've already talked to them a little bit, but Prosple became that window into contact for those early career individuals. LinkedIn is a primary social media channel. The Early Careers newsletter, which we release quarterly, has been a great success. It's gone from, I think, about 1,000 students in its first issue. We're now at just under 3,000. I think 2,800 it went out to in August. Open rates at somewhere around 80%. And again, just delivering a really clear, consistent message, and then partnering really strategically with organisations where we know we have an impact or can make an impact, is quite important. And then, I guess, lastly, how do you then measure that success, and what does that look like for us? I'll just get you to flick to that last slide, Aaron. Yeah, so look, for us, I guess since 2021, we've seen, just under 200% increase in graduate applications. I think if you look at that graph, the couple of graphs on the right-hand side, Jan to September 2022, 1,000-page views over that time period and 150 apply now clicks. You fast forward a year to 2023, and in the same time period, 6,000-page views and just under 2,000 apply now clicks. And then you fast forward another year, and I think if you did the math, that's somewhere around 40,000-page views, and I think it's somewhere over 2,500 apply now clicks. So it's just been really simple in what you're trying to do, and just being consistent with it, I think, is probably my key message. Understanding your story and what your selling points are as a business. For us, it's really that decarbonisation message. So happy to take any questions on that or dive a little bit deeper. But yeah, that's sort of a little bit of a story of how we've, I guess, built that strategy, and then what we've done, and then I guess how we've measured that success in the last wee while.
Thank you so much, Caleb. And look, a big thank you to all the panelists. We obviously went from sort of what is the case for a year-round strategy, with Lou and I looking at some of those high-level stats. Kate then talking about kind of that on-campus activation, and how you can best engage with tertiaries to make that a really long-lasting relationship year-round. We then we heard from Clancy at Prosple around really how to then activate that digitally, and get a really good conversion on your digital experience for the tertiary student population year-round. And obviously bringing that all together, a big thank you in terms of a bit more of a deep dive from Caleb on how that actually looks when you start to bring all those components together in an employment sort of situation. So a big thank you again from everyone. And I think now that we've obviously answered a couple of questions around social in the chat, but Lou and I will help to work with the panel on answering any other questions that have come up. Lou, have you seen anything while I've been summarizing?
Yes, we have a question for Caleb, who from Emma is keen to know what you include in your early career newsletter. Is it simply showcasing talent you've hired and their stories?
Yeah, great question. So we theme each newsletter up, Emma. So generally something that's topical or relevant at that time that we release it. So I get February was around the Prosple release. So obviously that was quite central to it. We include a little bit around some grad stories or a journey in there. If there's some relevant news in the media, we generally share our views on that or what we're doing in that decarb space, be it a major project. We had some sustainability reporting early in the year. One of our grads was helping that as part of her rotation. So that link between how the work you do how the work we do contributes to our mission, and then where possible link in that story or connection with grads or interns and how they're contributing to that mahi.
There's no other questions in the chat, but I do have a question myself, if that's okay. And Caleb, it is actually for you, because everyone has touched on the role of planning. So Kate talked about the role of planning and getting really clear about, there's a plethora of activities that you can do, but what that planning looks like. Clancy also talked about that from a digital perspective. What I heard from you, Caleb, is really the role of not only planning, but also working out where to invest your energy and also where you can be consistent. So when you decided to do something, that you were going to keep doing it. And I guess the question I have is for the employers on the call, how did you carve out the space to do that planning? Like with all of the activity that goes on as a grad program manager,
Yeah.
and there's so much different like operational activity that you're trying to stay on top of. How were you able to carve that space out in your working day to do that?
Yeah, great question. And I think Jan, our Chief People Officer, puts it really well. Creating space in the pace, right? I guess the way in which we work off quarters, and we sort of in this early adopters of Agile, I guess, is how I'd describe sort of my journey of where we're at. So timely, actually, end of Q1 at the moment for us. So the next Thursday, Friday will be spent sort of planning out my next quarter. Obviously, it takes a bit of work. Like this week, I really try and have a big, I guess, down low week in terms of how much work I do from a bigger picture perspective. It's really about planning out what the next quarter looks like. What are the priority items? We go through sort of a prioritization of where we rank work, how much, try and figure out how much time we need to commit to that, and then it's about chipping away at it over that quarter, and just reevaluating and doing that consistently each quarter. So that's probably been a big attribute as to, I guess, how we've been planned. Planning certainly not a strength of mine. I'm very like to just run with the flow of it. So yeah, it's been great to force me into being more planned, and just, I guess, pulling it back, right? You're always pulling it back to what that bigger problem is that you're trying to solve. So yeah, those are probably a couple of things.
And Caleb, maybe there's a bit of a follow-up to that with your adoption of Agile. Nikki's asked sort of what documents or artifacts you're using to track the phases of your program and all the activities. Like, how is there any advice you'll give other employers around artifacts that are really valuable to you?
Yeah. Oh geez, I'm probably not the best person. I've got my stuff everywhere. So um it's one of my goals, actually, I think, is to concise all my process and documentation over the next year. So good luck to me on that one. Miro is a great tool that we've used. We use Jira at the moment, so we've just migrated through to Jira, which is probably the next evolution up from an agile perspective. Those are probably the two main ones that we use from a documenting and tracking. Breaking it down into bite-sized pieces of work, and then being able to track your progress throughout each quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Love a visual approach too. It's great.
Yeah.
Clancy, you might be across the dialogue in the chat just around that question. I don't know if you have a view on that, I guess, flow through rate from social media into more traditional, I guess, business platforms like LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of the actual data, I wouldn't know off the top of my head, to be perfectly transparent. But yes, like definitely, they absolutely make that connection, Cam. And that's, I think, the beauty of social media as well, is they come across your employer brand or your jobs or something like that on a more professional platform like LinkedIn. And then social media gives you a way to further highlight those unique points and those more unique elements of your employer brand in a less typical way. And yeah, I think it does all just come down to those multiple touch points, like Lou mentioned, those, 7, I think it is, touch points that you need when it comes to marketing. So yes, absolutely, it all counts. But in terms of the actual data itself, I don't know if we actually had that, but we could definitely look into it for sure.
Thank you. Anyone else got any questions? Always leave that awkward silence. Okay, well, thank you all for the engaging discussions. Before we leave you, finally, we do obviously invite you to continue the discussion online. And for anyone that has attended today's event who shares a post on LinkedIn, of all places, with their key takeaway from the event and tags either Talent Solutions, Brightworks, or Prosple, or all three of us, if you're keen, in the post, you'll go in the draw to win one of 3 prizes, which we'll get in touch with you if you're the winner on, and arrange to get out with you directly, obviously depending on which country you are in. So get sharing and discussing, but for now, obviously a big thank you for coming along today. A big thank you to the panelists. We really appreciate all of your time.